folks, welcome to the Rebel's Edge. If it looks a little different, it's because I'm here at the NASDAQ. Pete's at some undisclosed location, and Mr. Tom Gronkowski is handling Gronk.
Gronk, baby.
Had to get Gronk's little brother to handle it.
Well, John, you never know. I mean, with all this quarterback changes and everything else, maybe Gronk's going to come back out of retirement and we bring the brother along with him.
It could happen. It could happen.
For sure.
But our friend Jared is our usual videographer, is still with his wife, nursing her back to health and hopefully nursing her successfully back to health. And we certainly appreciate you, Tom, handling this. So thank you. Let's dive right in, Pete, to the macro minute. I'm going to say August CPI coming in hotter than expected. Second straight acceleration of the annual pace and the first time above consensus in 7 months. That's my macro minute.
And I got to go right there with you, John. I'm going to piggyback on that. That is the macro minute. That's what the market's all about right now. You're looking at that CPI number, and I would even focus on something that you brought up yesterday. We've been talking about this for, since before July, actually. And then everybody's finally woken up to the idea of crude oil and gasoline. Well, gasoline prices, they're only up about 10%, John. So when you're looking at food and the energy side of things, there is certainly a lot going on right now, and people better embrace it because I think it's going to last for a while.
Yep. Sadly, Pete, this is not something that's going to go away just with the stroke of a pen or anything else. This is something that's going to be here for quite a while. And look for the next report, Pete, the September CPI that'll come out in October. Look for that to be hotter still, because the real acceleration has just happened in the past few weeks. All right, so fantastic futures. Pete's right. Crude oil, how could it be anything but? I've got, Pete, crude oil and pushing gas prices, diesel prices. Diesel, of course, is how everything gets delivered, folks. So that's everything from, the big trucks, the over-road truckers, less than full load truckers, the ships with fuel oil that run those big ships. Everything runs on crude oil one way or another, Pete.
Maybe even in our first topic about airlines, but we'll wait on that for just a second, John. I'm going to hit you with this. I knew you were going to go to crude, so I decided, you know what, let me get a little bit of a different angle. I'm going with nat gas. And why would I do that? Well, when you look at it year to date, it's down like 34%. That being said, and it was at a pretty decent loftier, I should say, level. But you go back to I think it's May, June, John, it was around $2. Now here we are right around 275, starting to make some gains. I would not be shocked to see nat gas start to make a bigger move because it's made a move, there's no doubt. But when you look at that year to date being down 30+%, I think there's plenty of room to the upside for nat gas as well. Keep an eye on it.
Absolutely. Energy pulls everything along with it, folks. And we don't need to belabor that, but that's just a fact. Petroleum is everything from plastics to, for instance, used plastics that are polar fleece. So that means maybe you'll be paying a bit more for that too. All right, let's talk about what Pete mentioned already. American Airlines, AAL, they said, Pete, that third quarter adjusted profits are going to need to be adjusted down because crude oil prices, which means jet fuel, as well as their new labor negotiated contracts, are causing American Airlines to miss on the profit front.
Yeah, and John, they had a full day's amount of stock being traded in the first couple hours, understandably so. Stock was down, probably call it somewhere between 4 and 4.5%, something like that. Some of the other airlines are getting hit along with it, but those numbers, John, I think based upon the numbers that they put out, this is probably a stock that should be hit a little bit more. They were looking for 85 to 95 cents, and they've adjusted down for the third quarter down to 20 to 30 cents. that is a heck of a cut, right? So I look at that and I get a little bit nervous for them. They also talked about their margins, and the margins are going to, well, clearly, obviously, are going to get hit. Now, this is something we've been talking about for a long time now. We said these energy prices eventually got to hit these guys. That's their biggest input cost, the airlines. And we've heard it from just about every airline now that there is, and some of the cruise ships as well. So not shocking to see American going down. Prices are going to also come down as fuel is going up. That's not necessarily a good spot for the airlines right now.
No, not good for the airlines, and it's yet another inflationary input, Pete. Let's talk about Rev G, which is the Rev Group. Now, these guys are basically, they make auto parts, Pete. And they came out with quarterly earnings, 35 cents a share. That was 10 cents better than estimates. The numbers are real good, but here's what's a little concerning, Pete. The stock was all the way to 14.50 in the pre-market. Right now it's 13.60. So it's given up almost half of its gain on the day. And anytime something like that happens, kind of makes you think that maybe they've got a little more room to the downside as far as giving back more of that pop.
Yeah, that could be, John, but I look at those numbers, and you looked at the same numbers. I mean, they were looking for 25 cents, they get 35 cents. A year ago, they got 24 cents. That's all pretty good. But the rest of the full year that they put out there for us, they were talking about, okay, net sales, we're looking at a higher number. Net income, a higher number. Free cash flow, now finally positive. I'm starting to look into that, John, and think, you know what, it makes sense. You know, you get a big pop like that. Sometimes you've got people who got in at the right time, maybe early. Maybe there's a little bit of sellers coming out there taking some off. I mean, a stock goes up 10, 12%. You can't blame anybody for taking a little bit off. Some of the guys might want to ride it out. That's all I'm attributing this to. So I like what we're seeing here. They also got the heavy construction, the farm equipment, all that type of thing. So this is a company that I think is probably in the right spot right now. I like it here, John.
All right. Well, I guess you sort of softened up my bearish take on the market reaction, Pete. So I'll throw in with Pete on this one. But I'd like to see it hold this 6% at least, since it was up as much as 12. All right, let's talk about Sigma Lithium, Pete. Sigma Lithium is a Brazil-based lithium miner. What they do, of course, I think the name makes it pretty clear what they do, Pete. But in case anybody was wondering, yeah, Sao Paulo, Brazil, they're pulling lithium out of the ground, and their board of directors are evaluating, quote, strategic alternatives at this point. Not because lithium isn't in huge demand. The stock was up 10% earlier today. Now it's up 18%, Pete, because some people probably feel, rightly so, that maybe this means that they're willing to sell the entire company. What's your take?
I would have to agree with you. I mean, anytime I hear that word strategic, John, it makes me start thinking, all right, buyout, who's going to do it? How's this going to happen? What's that number going to be? And let's not forget, Elon Musk, you know, we all love that guy. He says whatever the heck he wants to say, John. He has no muffler. But one of the things that he said that I think is extremely accurate is he said lithium is the new oil. And I think we'd all have to agree with that based upon everything we are seeing with the growth in EVs, not just with obviously Tesla, but everybody from Porsche on down. So when you look at that, you can understand the word strategic. I guess the big curiosity I'd have is, all right, who's going to take that big bite? But outside of that, this is very good for anybody, I think, in the lithium space right now.
Yep, huge demand. And if you were ever to explore strategic alternatives, this would be a good time.
It's a good time to go, man.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So that's SGML, Sigma Lithium. Now let's talk about Rocket Pharma, Pete, because the stock was surging, still is. It's up 41%. Food and Drug Administration, basically, they reached what they call a realignment, Pete. And you probably know more about what that would mean than me, but they have a phase 2 trial going on for treatment of something known as Danon disease. And RCKT was just explosive to the upside as soon as they talked about this, Pete. And as you always say, you know, phase 2 isn't the end of the road.
No.
So would you be diving into a stock that's up 40%?
You know, everybody seems to be really excited about this one, John. I am excited about this one as well. But to your point, I mean, we are at phase two and we see this excitement happen all the time. Even at phase one, people get overly excited. And then at some point in time, if they stumble, and I'm not saying these guys are going to stumble, but if they stumble, that's a huge problem because you're going to tumble all the way back and maybe then some, just because of the fact that, you know, the costs and everything that went along with this whole thing and all of that, all the money that has to get thrown in here, because each phase they are working on their own and they've got to go through that process. And you've got to go through phase one, phase two, phase three, and then you get to four, that puts you in. So this is something that's still a long way away, John. We're all excited about it. Hopefully it's something that can really work because people certainly are excited about this that have Danon disease. So that's something that we're all pulling for, but let's just remember it's phase two. So I would not be chasing this thing right now. I'm excited about what they're doing, but you know what? It's still very early. And that's the reality of it all.
Yeah. I mean, we all root for cures of various diseases when these companies are committing billions of dollars to get exactly, you know, over the finish line. And then once they do, they've spent the money. They generally, yeah, hopefully they can exact a great merger price or whatever, Pete. But these are rarely the companies that can bring them to market then. They've got to partner with somebody big when they go to do that. All right, let's talk, Pete, about what you got as far as college football, pro football. I know it's all football because it's Wednesday and it's Wednesday football day.
Yeah, and I was so excited for it, John. I was already looking forward to the game, but the game that the Vikings and the Philadelphia is actually tomorrow. So that being said, how about the New York Jets? Now, you had 4 plays with Aaron Rodgers and then he's gone and maybe gone for good, but for sure this year. That's already been, that's out there and determined. So here's the question for you, John. Do you like Zach Wilson enough? Did he show you enough from just some of the progress maybe from last year? And there were some stumbles along the way. His teammates love him though, and they love his tenacity. They love his aggressiveness. They traded up. They did all these things for him to get him. Now, do you stick with him though, John? And if you do you still have to bring in another veteran because who's behind him, so to speak, right? And that's where I think it gets kind of interesting because I've got a list of names that I'll ask you and see, would you take them or do you stick with what you've got? So it's Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, Matt Barkley, but I'm going to give you one that might make a little sense. This guy was a Super Bowl MVP. He's played for the Jets. He understands the system. He played for Saleh, and I'm talking about Joe Flacco. Big, strong guy, played for the Baltimore Ravens, did all the things that he did with them. And like I say, he was literally the MVP, got him a big, huge contract. He never really lived up to it at all. And as a matter of fact, that's why he wasn't at Baltimore very long and ended up with the Jets. But what do you do in a situation like this? You know, you and I love football. We both think we could be GM somewhere. I definitely, you know, I've actually had conversations with teams about it. Well, I think we both could. But, you know, I don't get caught up in just all the numbers that everybody else does. I think you got to have the eye test, the numbers and everything else. Is this guy the right guy? So what do you think about Zach Wilson? Is he the right guy? And even if he is, I think you got to bring in somebody to back him up, if nothing else, because the guy they have backing up is fine, but he's young with absolutely no experience. So what do you do here, John? What do you think you should do?
Well, like you said yesterday, Pete, what you don't do is bring in Tom Brady. Love him, but no, you don't bring in Tom Brady. Flacco, you know, depending on how he is physically, he could still perform. If they didn't have the quarterback that they have, Pete, who's a fantastic runner in Baltimore, as well as being one of the probably top 5, top 10 quarterbacks in all of football, Flacco'd still be playing for that team because it's not like he stunk it up, but you know, they got a pretty stout quarterback that they got nice and young, and he's been killing it. So I think Flacco, if he passes the physical, that's the guy I'd take too. I mean, Wentz and Foles, those are the two guys, of course, that led Philadelphia to the Super Bowl. And I would certainly say that those guys are more than capable. But if Flacco's available and has played both for Saleh, as you say, and the Jets, that's the guy that I bring in. And you're right, they do need another backup. I'd move this guy down to the practice squad and bring in Flacco if he passes the physical.
Yep. Yep. And the only other thing you could do, and I would consider this one. What if you called up the Dallas Cowboys and say, hey, look, opening week, your quarterback looked pretty damn good. Maybe we take Trey Lance. What do you want for him? You know, I mean, that something like that could happen. Or Case Keenum, or somebody who's already playing on a roster. You know, a lot of people dismiss Case Keenum. And let me tell you something, John. He did a great job with the Vikings. Nobody liked him. I don't know why. He actually executed, did a great job for him. He's a little bit smaller, but whatever. And he's had a decent career as both a backup and as a starter, but doesn't get a lot of credit. And the guy, he had an ungodly college career at Houston. Let me tell you, you want to talk about a guy lighting up the scoreboard. Speaking of lighting up scoreboards, let's go to college football. How about this? I'll throw this one out to you, John. In college football, 3 weeks in, it's impossible because you've got all these BS games and everything in front of us. So we really just don't know who's who yet. We will find that out soon. And I'm talking about all of them, except for one, Texas. Texas does stand out because they went to Alabama in Tuscaloosa and outplayed them. And, you know, that has to be something where that stands up pretty good. So for my top 3 teams right now, as it stands, I've got Texas number 2. Number 1, though, John, I've got USC. And here's why. Caleb Williams is unreal. We all know that. He's already projected to be the first pick in the draft this coming year, most likely the Heisman Trophy winner. Oh, by the way, he's already got 12 touchdowns and no interceptions to go with that whole thing. He's 880 yards in 3 games, and he's got a 78% completion. So he's looking pretty good so far. And their defense looks good. Now, that being said, they've played the Little Sisters of the Poor. They played their twin brother, who was awful. And then they actually did play Stanford. So it's not like it's a great, you know, set of competition they've had. But here's one for you right in your backyard. Notre Dame. I put them at number 3 right now. And Sam Hartman, that transfer quarterback, he's got 10 touchdowns. He's got no interceptions. He's at about a 75% clip as far as completions. And they got an offensive line, and they look like they might have a defense at Notre Dame, John. So I'm giving you my top 3. It's USC, Texas, and Notre Dame right now. I know Georgia's out there, but Georgia hasn't played anybody. So I can't really even figure out if they're good or not right now. They lost their quarterback. They got a different guy, all that kind of stuff. What do you think right now? Who's your top 3?
Georgia's my number 2, Pete.
Oh.
Texas is number 1 for me because they went out and won on the road, because this quarterback looks like he's everything that they thought he was when he went to Ohio State and then transferred, as you said. Yeah. So I've got Texas number 1. I've got Georgia number 2. And here's why, Pete. We all know they put out, you know, a bunch of first rounders every effing year. Well, how about this, Pete? They got 13 starters back. So, yeah, I mean, that's the last thing anybody in the SEC would like to see. You'd much rather have that TCU situation that you described where, yeah, they're a good team and they're going to play Colorado and they're going to play at home. The Horned Frogs, you know, were in the national championship run last year, but guess what? They only had 4 starters back. Yeah. Georgia, 13. And that, I mean, truly they just reload, Pete. It's not that they rebuild, they reload. And when you look at some of those players, yeah, I agree with you. The reason I can't really keep them at number 1, like a lot of the services, is exactly right. Who did they play? Nobody. Yeah. Nobody so far. So I've got Texas number 1. I've got Georgia number 2. And I'm going back and forth between 2 Big Ten teams, Michigan and Ohio State. But I'm going to give it to Harbaugh and Michigan for now, even though he can't be on the sideline for one more game. The first 3 games, folks, he's not on the sidelines. But like Pete said, they're doing the Georgia thing right now. They're not playing anybody.
Right.
This is,
Yeah.
you know, I resent that they're playing the people that they're Pete, UNLV, really?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, John. I agree with you. By the way, Ohio State, I don't know that they have figured out the quarterback situation. You know, maybe they have, maybe they haven't. You know, that's not always a bad thing. It even could be a potential good thing. But I think you're right. I think between those two right now in the Big Ten, it might even be Penn State, but Penn State or Michigan or something. Penn State looks pretty damn good this year. They are loaded. And so it'll be interesting, but nobody's played anybody yet. You know, Michigan hasn't, Ohio State really hasn't, Penn State really hasn't. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out. Then you've got Harbaugh, who's not even able to coach on the sidelines, as you know, so, and you pointed out. So it's interesting, but you know, that's kind of why I like USC right now. I love the coach. I think he's really good. You might hate him because of what he's done in his career, left Oklahoma and did this and did that. But I'll tell you what, he's a hell of a coach. He's an even better recruiter, and they are loaded. They are stacked at USC. They're like the old days of John McKay, for anybody old enough to remember that name. But he had USC teams that every year were fighting for a national title. And I think that's what this guy's doing as well.
I'll throw a sleeper in, Pete. Not the number 4 team because they don't deserve it yet, but Utah.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to play this team, folks. Nobody. Because last year, all they did was beat USC in the Heisman Trophy winner twice.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
And so I'd say keep an eye on Utah. Don't let them slip too far down your depth chart as far as top teams, because I would definitely put them, Pete, in the top 10, and they might even be 6 or 7 right now, because I'd have them ahead of LSU, Oregon, probably Washington as well, because this is a mean group of kids.
I'll tell you, you're right
field.
though, John. I totally agree with you. I think Utah's unbelievable. And on top of that, think of this. Everybody says SEC, Big Ten when all the dust settles, right? How about that Big 12? All right, you lose Oklahoma and you lose Texas, but you gain a lot. I mean, you've got Utah and you've got Colorado coming back, and you've got, I mean, I'll tell you what, don't sleep on the Big 12, because they got some talent and some great teams that are going to be a part of that in the future as well.
Absolutely. Well, again, Jared, if you're watching, and I'm sure he is, Pete, get your wife fixed.
Yeah. Get her healthy.
Get her healthy, sir. But take your time to do it. Gronk's doing a great job, and we certainly appreciate all the nice comments that you guys shot yesterday for how this version of the Rebels Edge looks. Again, you can thank Tom Gronkowski primarily for that, but Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. See you then, everybody.